Good. So we'll go ahead and move on into the new material. All right, so today what we're gonna cover is auto walk. All right. So I'll go off of memory and then I'll kind of consult my notes, but you can think about, most of Shinzen Young's, or let's just take see, hear, feel. It's a very perception-oriented practice. So you're looking at perception, like what am I perceiving, right? And we're noting to keep up with that. Very good. Auto walk and auto talk, auto think, auto everything is more about noticing or bringing mindfulness to expression. And so like one way to kind of show you what auto is you can take your hand like this, put it out in front of you, and then you have to tense the muscles of the top of your forearm in order that the hand fight against gravity like this. And now just let it fall. And then do it again. And so that just simply letting it fall, that's totally auto. Another way to come at auto is just total no self. It's, actually very, very little of what we do and experience has any volitional component. And then also I'll add that when you look at that volitional component with tremendous scrutiny, the sense that it is volitional also falls apart, but we can discuss that more later. But so what we're doing in the auto practice is just noticing how the whole system, the whole body-mind expresses itself, and it expresses itself from a place of no self, from a place of no control, just automatically. Okay, so now I'll get into kind of this long list of what is auto, because auto is kind of a weird, it's kind of, I think, the weirdest of Shinzen Young's practices on a certain level. So auto is expression instead of perception. Auto is spontaneity. Auto is like autopilotness. Like, for example, the way that my hands are moving, it's just doing itself. And maybe if I investigate, I can find something that feels volitional. And actually that's arising spontaneously and automatically by itself as well. So more about auto. Auto is like muscle memory, right? Like if I were to say, now, okay, get up and go to the kitchen and get a cup out of the cupboard, all of that would happen automatically, right? And so the auto practice is like seeing that and seeing how it arises and self-organizes. And actually, I think that self-organizing is probably the best explanation for what auto is. Also, it has this kind of light, bouncy quality. Kind of there's a sense of if you really start paying attention to auto, your whole experience will become lighter and kind of bouncier. Because it's interesting. If you pay attention to what is self-organizing, then you also start experiencing, you kind of notice effortlessness, and as you notice effortlessness more and more, you can even see how when you put forth effort, that is also effortless. And so as you develop and attune yourself to auto, your life will become more effortless. Let's see here. This is not a noting technique. I mean, you can maybe note if you like to, but it's not traditionally a noting technique. Also, I'll give you a little bit of history as to how this technique got developed. So I actually do think that this is a unique contribution of Shinzen's, an original and unique contribution. Auto happens if you practice a lot. But what's weird is I don't think anybody ever really discussed it and formalized it in a really explicit way to where they came up with practice instructions for it. So when I was learning about this technique, they talk about how in Zen, especially at Zen retreats, sessions, like everything is like kind of set up to where it leans very heavily on auto. Like you get up a certain way, you walk in a circle a certain way. Everything is like totally scheduled. Also, the chanting is very rote. And so the actual chanting that they do is like auto talk. Anyway, so my point is that I think by Shinzen, like making this explicit, and then giving out as a practice is a real kind of unique contribution. Anyhow, okay. I think it's already clear, but just to reiterate, so this motor activity and just expression, automatic expression, is a huge part of our experience, but we're not used to paying any attention to it, right? It's in a certain way, I think there is a parallel between auto and rest. Like I think I didn't teach, I forget if I taught rest in this course yet, but many of you know the rest practices of Shinzen Young, and like you notice, excuse me, you put your attention on what is inactive. So in this, which is the opposite of what you usually do. Usually in life, we put attention on what is active, and in the same way, auto is putting attention on things that we're not consciously trying to control, but rather just spontaneously arise by themselves. Okay, cool. Okay, so why would we want to do this practice? Well, first off, it's fun and light. You'll actually notice that if you do this, you'll enjoy the practice more. And yeah, it's just, it can actually be a refuge for you. So it's another reward state. And the more rewarding we can make the practice, the more likely we are to do it. The more likely we are to do it. The more we do it, the more we do it, the more we deepen our own experience. So again, this is about turning the unconscious conscious, right? And what we're trying, and you'll see when we do the auto walk practice, you're going to just let the machine walk, and you're not going to try to control how it walks, but you're going to notice this spontaneous walking that arises. And so as we, so this is quite interesting. As we pay more attention to what is spontaneous and bring a quality of consciousness to what is unconscious and what is spontaneous, then we can kind of, in a backward sense, like bring some of that spontaneity back into the rest of our lives. So we become kind of more spontaneous and more kind of able to go with the flow. It's really, really cool. Also, seeing, like consciously seeing how automatic and unconscious our experiences actually can encourage a deep wisdom of seeing how we're not in control to the same extent that we generally think. And then that seeing that lack of control encourages dropping blame. So we quit blaming ourselves and we quit blaming others because we have seen real time how so much of what comes up for us is completely outside of our control. So it actually helps with both wisdom and compassion. In Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about wisdom and compassion being the two wings of the bird of practice, like the bird of Buddhism. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how, but let's just reiterate how we do this practice. So, firstly, let's all do auto talk together. I'll demonstrate. And so this is the chanting that Shinzen Young does, just to make it very secular. He just says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so now, I mean, hopefully you're not near anybody and you're by yourself, so no one will think you're totally crazy. But let's all do that together. So we're just going to chant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And those of you non-native English speakers, do it in your own language. So, okay. And then you're going to watch how it's automatic. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'll be quiet and you just do it by yourself. Now keep going. And now notice how it spontaneously arises. It's just doing itself. And the auto is just the noticing how it's automatic, noticing how it's spontaneous. Okay, keep going. Okay, good. Very good. Now we're going to do another kind of auto. We're actually going to do auto move. Very similar to auto walk, but here we're going to do just sitting in the Zen sense of just simply sitting. And what I want you to pay attention to is your posture. Notice how the postural muscles adjust dynamically, and it is completely outside of your control. So just sit up straight. And then notice how there's this wavering back and forth. Like at no point are you still. You know, your postural muscles are relaxing and contracting in such a way to keep you upright, and it's not volitional. Now, bring your attention to the entire breathing process and try not to breathe intentionally in any way, but just simply notice how breathing takes care of itself. Okay, you can let that go. Okay, now let's get back into discussing how we do the practice. I think you all have a pretty good sense already, but we'll keep going here. So you know, again, with any auto practice, we just let the thing arise and we don't fool with it. We don't get in there and monkey with it. We just let it be. We just let the thing do itself. And we enjoy the lightness and the levity of the thing doing itself. So with the walking practice, I like to think about it, it's just letting the walking happen. That's all it is, like letting the animal walk. Also, and I think it's a little bit harder to do, you can eventually do this with thought. Like you'll just notice how thought self-arises and organizes itself. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to take like 3 minutes. Let's all get up, walk away from the computer, and just walk back and forth at a normal pace. This is so the practice is going to be mostly focused on walking, but just walk at a normal pace. Don't walk slowly, and then just let the walking take care of itself, and just notice the whole thing. So okay, I'll see you back. You know what? Let's take actually fully 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So see you at 11:36 my time. 11:36. Okay. Okay, cool. Now I have a little bit more lecture, but I just want to just check in. How did that go for people? Any questions? I'll start with a report. Oh, it's cool. It's always cool to do auto walk. It's kind of freeing and joyous. Okay, that was my experience. Anastasia says it was fun. Steve says pretty good. Oh, okay. Chris says that was weird. Reminds me of the inquiry in that paying attention to my movements was a kind of sideways way to silence the mind. Also, I was mindful of my actions in a new, deep way. Man, totally. I think, I don't know, maybe about 8 months ago, I taught a class on self-inquiry, and self-inquiry was a primary focus. But the other thing that I taught was auto walk, the suite of auto practices. It's very kind of the whole non-dual flavor. And yet it all has that kind of, it's just all very related. Yeah. That's what I find as well. Okay. Any other questions or reports? Okay, cool. Something else I wanted to mention, and it's a very important benefit. Auto walk helps with the aspect of mentalization around control and spontaneity. So mentalization is this whole set of, we'll call it abilities or behaviors, where it's like the mind being aware of the mind being able to look at itself, the mind being able to understand the experience of others and kind of interface with others in a functional way. So like, and now there's like many different forms of mentalization, but one form of mentalization is like somebody's like yawning and looking away. Okay, well you comprehend they're disinterested, and then maybe and you respond to that in an adaptive way, like maybe speaking to them in a way that would be more resonant or wrapping up the conversation or whatever. Mentalization is also, metacognitive introspection, like seeing your own experience, your own understanding yourself in a sense. But there are all these kind of, again, there are lots of different aspects of mentalization. And for example, there's this also, like mentalization has to do with like a balance. And you see this where people are too emotional, right? And they haven't brought in reason to balance out their emotions. And then with other people, you see how they're too cognitive, right? Everything's thought out, they're suppressing emotions, etc. And so here, mentalization has to do with balancing those out. That your mentalization training would be to balance those out. So auto walk is really cool because it helps you balance out control and spontaneity and start it actually teaches you how to even cultivate spontaneity, right? It's like, they say, well, be yourself, just be yourself. It's like, that's like both the best and the worst advice ever, right? Just be yourself. Well, in a sense, the auto walk practice teaches you how to just be yourself, which is an important aspect of mentalization. Anyway, okay, moving on from that point. So now I'm just going to make a couple more notes about basically kind of contextualizing the practice and speaking to why it's basically cool. And then we'll move on into the guided practice. Okay, so cool. So I am going to read, which is a little bit boring, but it's just like 2 paragraphs. Auto walk is a study and an inquiry in of its own, right? We just open up to automaticity and no self in the present moment. We just simply come into presence, come into awareness, and we let all the ego stuff fall away. It's a little bit like Chris was saying. He's like, oh, just paying attention to the automaticity of it, like automatically got me out of the ego mind. I'm kind of putting my own words there, but anyway. Okay. Now the following point I think is kind of interesting, especially for those of you that are familiar with TMI. So relatedly, awareness is automatic and outside of our control. Like, so for example, if you put your attention on something, like look at the T on your keyboard, the letter T, or anything, and then really hold your attention there. But now notice everything arising in peripheral awareness. So the T, focusing on the T or whatever the primary object is, there's a sense of volition there. But then the rest of what you notice is completely involuntary. So again, what we're doing in the practice is we're sensitizing ourselves to, like, in a sense, the difference between attention and awareness, and then bringing a type of control or volition to being able to be aware of awareness itself, which being aware of awareness itself is a good candidate for one of the highest practices, one of the most subtle practices. So anyway, okay, I'll keep going with this paragraph. But we can learn to lean towards awareness, and then it arises spontaneously and does its thing as long as the ego mind does not intervene. Here with auto move, we start getting familiar with the activity of uncontrived spontaneity and of not interfering with these subtle states. So auto walk is an accessible entry point into what are often thought of as advanced practices like do nothing, just sitting, open awareness, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, etc. So just one more little paragraph here. So another thought, I think that auto walk and the other auto practices are more ineffable. And ineffable means like hard to put into words, hard to understand. It's a more ineffable practice than the other unified mindfulness practices. Because the other practices are more so an application of attention, whereas the auto practices are more awareness-based. The object, and so this is a little bit of repeating what I was just saying a moment ago. The object of attention can be known conceptually and labeled, but the object of awareness cannot be. Like, come into open awareness right now. Can you have a thought about it? Can you even know what it is conceptually? And now let's contrast that. Like, look at something very specific. Like right now I'm looking at the number 6 on my keyboard. And I'm like really knowing, aha, yes, this is a number 6. I see it. And then now expand out again. Open up your visual periphery. Also open up into the auditory field and into the somatic field. And let it all be there all at once in awareness. And I have no words for it. I can't describe it. I don't know what it is. And I cannot know it conceptually. I can't catch it in concept. And so here we see how this kind of allowing, I don't know how to put this. It's like by bringing our attention to awareness, which arises spontaneously and cannot be really controlled or even known conceptually, we really sensitize ourselves to what is beyond concept. Okay, so now I'll go back to this, back to reading this. So again, the object of attention can be known conceptually and labeled, but the object of awareness can't be. Awareness doesn't really have an object in the same sense. Rather, it is just known broadly and openly without discrimination. Like, so come back into awareness, this open awareness. And notice how it's just, all it is receptivity. All it is just the quality of taking in. There's no discrimination. When you're in open awareness, you're not taking one thing in and pushing out the other. Whereas you can do that with attention. Now, like, focus your attention on something. And you're focusing on it with exclusion to everything else. It seems that as awareness type practices deepen, they move farther and farther from object consciousness to subject consciousness, non-duality, a consciousness knowing itself, right? I think this is why a practitioner's practice, why the more a practitioner's practice is awareness-based versus more attention-based, the more woo-woo the language to describe it becomes, right? If you talk about these attention practices, they're very easy to describe, but these awareness practices, there's like no words that really describe them. So language just can't get at what is happening in awareness, as it's not a space where discrimination comes to the fore, like with attention, right? In language, it's all about parsing and contrasting, right? Not this, but not that, etc. So my point is that this is possibly why the auto practices are a more difficult technique to explain in precise words. So again, my point is that because it's more of an awareness practice, you can't really describe it, because awareness itself is all about non-discrimination, whereas attention is about discrimination. Okay, so maybe I might have banged on about that a bit much. All righty. I'll look at this question from an author here. I see the sense of volition in being able to start and stop something. You start auto walking and then you stop auto walking, for example. Okay. Okay, this is cool. I'm glad you brought this up, author. If you look, so what I would tell you to do is have tremendous curiosity about the volition around starting and stopping. Really look at that. Where does that come from? I'm going to teach another course, I don't know, maybe starting in a month or something. And one of the practices I'm going to do or teach is this practice of inquiring, where do thoughts come from? Where is the place that thoughts come from? And if you just pay attention to that, if you ask yourself that right now, it's nothing. Can't be said. And all that happens is quiet. Anyway, so that might be a bit tangential. Anyway, so if you really pay attention to volition, I think you're going to find something very interesting there. Okay, great. Thank you for your question, author. All right, any other questions before we get into the guided practice? So again, this practice is simply bringing your attention to what is happening automatically and not monkeying with it, just letting it be, but having this open, curious awareness about what's happening.